This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. Despite last year's gyrations in the stock market, the economy is chugging along, yet millions of Americans are one paycheck away from financial ruin. They find it impossible to save, while even some more affluent people simply fail to put anything aside for a rainy day. According to a Federal Reserve study, nearly half of Americans would not be able to come up with $400 in savings in an emergency. 39% have saved nothing, not for emergencies, not for vacations, not for retirement. What's the problem? Is it the reality of wages that have been stagnant for decades? Is it habit, willpower, lack of willpower, something else? It must be something else, because it isn't just those living hand to mouth who find it difficult to save. So as we start this new year, we look more closely at what's going on, what we all can do better when it comes to managing and saving our money, and why it matters. Larry Carroll, CEO and Chief Wealth Strategist for Carroll Financial, has been a frequent guest on this program when we talk about the stock market and investing. But he'll be the first to tell you that before you invest, you have to save. There is a difference, and he joins us again in our Spirit Square studio. Welcome back. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mike. Great to be here.
And with us via Skype is Parker Cohen, Associate Director of Savings and Financial Capability at Prosperity Now. That's an organization providing matched savings accounts and other financial empowerment tools to adults and children, believing that prosperity starts with financial security, not being one paycheck away from financial disaster. Parker Cohen, thank you for being here this morning as well.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let me start with you, Larry, because the stock market has been on this wild ride, and people are concerned about it. Even many people's personal economies maybe have been affected by these severe gyrations, particularly if you're close to or in retirement, and you see your 401k value going up and down sharply. The worst Christmas Eve performance in the stock market ever. The best day after Christmas performance ever. A bad end to the year, a rough beginning of 2019. For those who have retirement savings, any kind of savings in the market, 401ks, whatever, what does all this mean for them?
Mike, the truth is it means virtually nothing. People get way too focused on these short-term moves in the market that are really noise, and you really have to accept the fact that it's part of the game. It's part of investing. The reason the markets provide higher returns than CDs is you have to put up with these ups and downs over time. And you really need to think in terms of the long-term picture and the long-term returns.
But how can we be relaxed when professional investors are reacting in such a way that the market is going up, going down, going up, going down, and severely up and down?
Well, I don't see professionals reacking.
Well, why is the market going up?
Well, I mean, that's a lot of different things. I think a lot of it's sentiment. I think a lot of it's the media. You participate in that, Mike. You help create all this anxiety that people have.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
He is certainly a factor in the anxiety that's out there. No question.
In the past, when we've talked about these gyrations in the market, everything you've said just a moment ago, you've said before, but now we have this new element that we didn't have before. We have a president who's somewhat erratic. We have a president who has allowed the government to shut down and says he's going to dig his heels in until he gets his money for his wall. And the Democrats on the other side are saying the same things. We're not giving you the money. We'll keep it closed, or they're going to try to do a resolution today to open it, but we'll see. And then we have all this trade policy, these back and forth with China, which is putting an uncertainty into the market. So we have something new here that we didn't have before.
But having said that, if you look at the last 30 to 40 years, in any individual year, there will be a move down from top to bottom of about 14% on average, sometimes less, sometimes more. In 2018, the move down was 20% from top to bottom, but in 17, it was a low single digit number. So, it's part of the deal. I wish that Trump didn't add to the volatility. He certainly positions in such a way that does. But I also think people overreact to it. If you go back and look at the last 10 presidents, go back to Carter and come forward looking at presidents, the market basically goes up during every presidency. The good ones, the bad ones, whatever. You have to have some faith in the idea that the American economy is the largest economy in the world and continues to grow.
So the people most affected by this are people who panic when the market goes up.
Absolutely.
And the people who are affected by the markets at all are people who are invested in the markets, are people who are not invested in the markets. Are they impacted by this in any way?
Well, I think a lot of people who are not invested use this as an excuse to not be invested in the markets. And by doing that, they miss out on that long-term 8 to 10% returns that the market
And as
provides.
I said at the beginning, and you told me this first, I think 25 years ago, on another radio station, long ago and far away, that before you can invest, you must save. And Parker Cohen is with us, the Associate Director of Savings and Financial Capability at Prosperity Now. We have a low savings rate in America. Atlantic Magazine says, though, that it's a myth that Americans cannot save because for decades they did. And we'll talk about which decades they did and when it stopped. But what has changed, Parker? Why has it become so difficult, or why have people become resistant to saving?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in your introduction, you hit on a couple of the main points here. So first of all, we have a policy system at the federal level that does not really encourage savings. We have a financial services system that does not necessarily make it accessible and easy for low-income families to save. And critically, what you touched on at the beginning around wage stagnation, we know that many low to moderate income families are saving regularly. However, this saving is not accumulating over time because it's having to be drawn down to be able to cover for months where their incomes are lower or their expenses spike. So this income volatility, such as caused by unpredictable wages or hours that are going to be worked in a given week or month, many families that are in these situations practice income smoothing is what it's called. So they'll be saving in the months that they do better to be able to use that money in months that they don't do quite as well. So as a result, it's hard to build a large amount of emergency savings. And it's definitely hard to save for medium and longer term goals and build up that savings over time to be able to move towards prosperity.
Now, during the Reagan administration, people out of the top 10% in terms of wealth, in other words, the bottom 90%, in other words, most of us, were able to save 10% of their income every year, which actually sounds high to me, but that's what the figure says. It has declined precipitously since then to a negative 10%, whatever that means, and not just here, but also in Canada, in Germany, and in Japan. Is the cost of living that much higher, or are we simply buying more stuff? Parker.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's a case of buying more stuff. I think the cost of living is definitely higher than it was at that time. We've also seen a rise in consumer debt. So we have medical, student loan debt. We have debt that's come from short-term lending, such as payday lenders, so that you can cover those gaps in times when your expenses are exceeding your income due to that wage stagnation or unpredictable wages. We know that debt makes it very difficult to accumulate savings. We know this disproportionately impacts communities of color, and that despite holding less debt, African Americans have more trouble making debt payment due to lower assets that are from a history of discrimination that have left few opportunities to build wealth over time. So all of these factors come into play, and it's really not just one thing. It's wage stagnation, which is tied into increases in debt, and and many other issues that come into play that reduce the savings rate and make it really difficult for families to build up a sufficient amount of savings.
The Washington Post says that wage growth is being wiped out entirely by inflation, which obviously makes savings more difficult because you're spending all of your money on your living expenses, if that's the case. Is that true? Has inflation really increased that much?
No, I don't think inflation has substantially changed, but I think wage growth has changed. One of the big things that's happening that is not over with, not anywhere close to over with, is this idea of when wages go up of consequence, you begin to look at other alternatives like robots that are able to bring costs down to be competitive. So that helps put a cap on how high wages can go, because if they go up too much, you begin to look at alternative ways to get there. I think that, and Parker mentioned this in passing, I think one of the significant issues is the student loan debt. The baby boom generation psychologically wanted their children to have it better than they did. So they were very committed to the idea of those children getting an education.
And that's because most baby boomers had it better than their parents.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. And they wanted their children to have it better. But to borrow $100,000 to end up with a degree in European Romance languages, I'm not sure that does anybody any good, particularly when you get out and have to try to service that debt over time.
What you're getting to there, though, I think, is personal decisions. It's
That's
not
correct.
Just you decide to major in Romance languages. It's also you're making $18,000 a year, and you have a family of 5, and you want to lease a Mercedes. That's a bad decision.
Absolutely. One of the things I've talked about, and I've said it to you before, is when children come out of college now, let's say they're 23, 24, they want to start with the exact same lifestyle they had in their parents' home when they were in high school. So they want the nice home, they want the big TV, the nice car, and they don't look at their parents scrimped and saved for 30 years to get to that point where they were in high school.
They have photographs they can look back on?
That's what they need to. But I see it all the time that they don't want to go through that same process that their parents went through, and are willing to take on debt to do it. The savings issue, and I'll relate it to investments because that's the way I think. But if you're a great saver, you don't need to be a great investor. You can accumulate and have what you need in retirement. But too many people aren't great savers. They try to make it up on the investment side.
Okay, when we come back from the break, I want to explore that a little bit, because savings rates at banks have been historically low for years now. So if you're regularly feeding your piggy bank at the bank, it's like feeding a piggy bank on the dresser. It ain't paying nothing. So how can you do that? And then also when we come back, I want to talk about how you save when you're living paycheck to paycheck. We're here with Larry Carroll and Parker Cohen. We're taking a break at Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Southeast Radiation Oncology Group, presenting Space Ore, a biocompatible gel minimizing side effects of radiation prostate cancer treatments. Details at treatcancer.com/prostate. Well, tomorrow is already Friday, and that means the weekly news roundup here on Charlotte Talks. And as we start 2019, problems in the North Carolina 9th Congressional District are still unsolved. We have the latest, including news that Pat McCrory will not enter the race, though he's not ruling out another run for governor. Mayor Vi Lyles ends 2018 by saying there's more to do this year on affordable housing and infrastructure, and despite a long losing streak, the Panthers end the year on a high note. We'll see what that means for next year. Will there be a next year? Of course there'll be a next year. Our roundtable of reporters will talk about those stories and more tomorrow of this program at 9.
Time and money are running out for parts of the government hit by the shutdown. Hundreds of thousands of workers do not know whether they will get paid next week. As the standoff continues, we'll share your shutdown stories and consider how and when it might end. Next time on 1A.
That's coming up at 10 following Charlotte Talks with Mike Collins on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's Charlotte Talks on 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking about saving at the start of this new year. Larry Carroll is here, CEO and Chief Wealth Strategist for Carroll Financial, and Parker Cohen, Associate Director of Savings and Financial Capability at Prosperity Now. When surveyed about why they don't save, the number one reason people cite is expenses. And I have a comment here from Debbie on Facebook who says, I have issues saving. I live paycheck to paycheck. So how do I find ways to save? Parker, this is what you deal with every single day. You have an answer for?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and it really varies per individual, of course, because everyone's circumstances are unique, and everyone has a different relationship with their own finances. And so we work with organizations across the country that provide an array of services to help families think through this and how to best be able to set aside some savings, whether it's for a goal or just to have for emergencies. So a lot of organizations provide tailored financial coaching. So these are nonprofit organizations across the country that'll work one-on-one and have a coaching relationship with an individual to help them look at their finances holistically, look at what they really want out of their finances, and set concrete and attainable goals and work over time to achieve them. So I would really encourage her to explore that sort of avenue and see if there are financial coaches in her community that are available. Also, there are
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say there are programs, you alluded to this in the introduction, there are programs across the country that work with families that are living paycheck to paycheck to incentivize or match their savings. And so these are sometimes called individual development accounts or other sorts of incentivized savings programs, like there's a program called Saver Life by an organization called EARN that provides a match for a certain amount that an individual saves. So these programs are designed to allow you to save a little bit over time and accumulate enough savings, and then get that savings matched at a rate of sometimes 1-to-1 or 2-to-1
Wow.
or even more, to be able to purchase a bigger asset like a home or pay for your education. And so these programs still exist. There's a federal program called the Assets for Independence Act that has not received appropriations recently, but there are many nonprofits out there that still provide these sorts of incentivized and match savings programs to help families do this. So that and financial coaching and other similar services can help families think through what is right for them and how to save to get ahead.
I want to talk some more a little bit later on in the program about these individual development accounts, because I know that your organization, Prosperity Now, is involved in helping people get to those accounts. And I also want to mention that you can join our conversation by emailing us at charlottetalks@wfae.org. Search for us on Facebook or get to us through Twitter at Charlotte Talks. Let me get back to this thing you said just before the break, Larry, about you don't have to be an investor to save for retirement. If the market scares you or you don't think you have enough money to put at risk in the market, because that's what you're doing, you are putting it at risk, you can do it through normal savings opportunities. But how, when savings rates are so low, can you build enough money to retire on it?
Well, let's come back. I said if you're a great saver.
Meaning?
I would say a great saver saves 10%
Okay.
of their income. And if you're a great saver, you don't have to be a great investor. I'm not saying you don't need to invest, but you don't have to stretch. You don't have to take a lot more risk than you're comfortable with. You can invest conservatively and hopefully still get where you're going. You made an interesting comment about kind of the rates. I think one of the things that's been overlooked in the way the Fed has driven interest rates down over the past 10 years, and they've stayed low, and savers have not been paid very well, is if you take a step back and think about it, what has happened is a great transfer of wealth from savers to investors. Because when you drive interest rates down, the savers don't get paid, but it is very, very good for other investment assets, as we've seen in the market over that period of time. Now, they drove rates down for a reason, to prime the economy, but I think we haven't talked enough about how that bottom line was a transfer of wealth from savers to investors.
But if you raise interest rates for savers, you're also raising interest rates for borrowers. So if you're a saver
Right.
who needs a new car or a new house, it's going to cost you more. It's a bad thing. The whole thing,
and for
there's no way out of it.
And for companies, for a lot of companies, money is kind of a cost of goods sold. So the more money cost, the more their costs go up, the less their earnings are. So there's a balance between these two things. And what we had is a shift very much in one direction for 10 years. And we're in the process, I think, of moving back more to a balance at this point.
So between 1960 and 1973, it is reported that income per capita grew at an annual rate of 3.2%. In the next 2 decades, it fell to 1.5% annually. It's in those next 2 decades that people stopped saving as well. Is there a correlation? In other words, if wages went up, would savings go up? Or would people simply spend more of that money on things?
A lot of them would spend more. One of the strategies that a person who has trouble savings can use, and maybe living that paycheck to paycheck type approach, is the idea of, for any raises or bonuses I get, I am going to save a higher percentage of that, rather than you get a $100 a week raise and all that happens is you eat out more and your expenses go up $100 a week. A lot of people at the margin need to think about, for additional money that comes in, I am going to save a higher percentage of that, or use more of it to pay off debt.
It's discipline and self-denial. And Parker, that's hard for people to get a grip on, because the future is far away, particularly for a 25-year-old. To tell a 25 or a 30-year-old, if you take that raise and you bank it, don't spend it, don't up your style of living, stick it in the bank, because when you turn 65, it will be there for you. That's hard for them to wrap their head around. What do you tell them?
Yeah, that's a very well-known behavioral economics principle. It's really hard to envision your future self. So I think what we need are savings products and programs that really are designed with this understanding of our own psychology and our, these behavioral economics principles, have them embedded in these products and services to make it easier for low, moderate, or any income level individual to be able to think about that future self and to be able to save. So the retirement system for employers and more or employees, and especially more affluent employees, has been very successful at this because they automate it. They make it very easy. Many employers that are really smart about this will automatically raise, work with employees to raise the amount that they save every year. And that sort of automation that takes the decision making, out of
it's the beauty of the 401k.
Hands. Yeah, exactly. And we need to apply those sorts of principles in different different products and programs, especially for low-income families that where these products haven't really been designed for them.
Let's
Make it easier for them to save.
Let's talk about the so-called beauty of the 401k, because people who are alive today, except for older people, don't remember that there was something else called pensions before the 401k. And the advantage of a pension was the company put the money in. Mm-hmm. They may have reduced your salary unbeknownst to you to allow them to put that money in, but you knew coming out when they gave you the gold watch, that pension was going to be there. You didn't have to think about it. You didn't have to worry about the stock market. It was just there for you, and the check came every month like Social Security. With 401ks, the shift began in the 70s, where employees would sometimes, or to certain degrees, match what you put in, which meant, you'd have more coming out in the end. But you had to put your money into it. You had to sacrifice. And you don't know, as you're putting that money in, what's going to be there every month when it's time to take it out. Is there beauty in that? Larry, explain that to me. What's beautiful about that?
Yeah, it's tough for the general public. I can make the case very easily that while you're working and making that monthly contribution to the 401k, you actually wish that the price of stocks went down because you buy more and more.
It's on sale.
It's on sale. Yeah. And you're making those monthly contributions. The day you want things to start going up is the day you retire and are going to be a net seller taking money out of it. But it's very difficult for the average person to think that way.
The other problem with 401ks, Parker, it seems to me, is that according to studies that I've read, for every dollar contributed to a 401k, 40 cents flows out in premature withdrawals because people are borrowing from their 401ks for their expenses or for their wants. Let's put it that way. Is there a way to stop that, to convince people not to do that? And if they are doing that, and because people have put so little aside for retirement, what are the implications of that down the road?
Yeah, great question. So there are ways, and they're really emerging for us to tackle this issue. So Prudential right now is working on exploring an emergency savings vehicle, sometimes called a sidecar, and this is something that we've put a paper out on, a sidecar account that goes along with your retirement savings. So as you save for retirement, a certain amount of that money goes into what amounts to a more liquid emergency savings fund at the same time. So the idea here is that if you do have unexpected expenses or you do need to take out some of that money you saved for retirement, you've got some money in this more liquid account that you can draw from without having to borrow from your future and take out of the 401k. There are, obviously immense implications for this, as you said. If you are, obviously there are immediate tax implications. You're absolutely not getting the most out of that money that you've saved, and your future is more at risk in terms of retirement. So giving people options to be able to save for soon while they're saving for later is really critical.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the things we see with the younger generation is they change jobs more often.
Right.
Than our parents may have.
So it's a good thing they have 401ks because there wouldn't be any pensions.
It is, but the problem is that when they move from job A to job B, right, they look at their 401k, it's $3,000, and they say, just give me the money. And they take it, and it doesn't move forward. If you worked at 5 different jobs and you left the money in every time, it still accumulates. But if each time you change jobs, you look at it and say, well, there's really not that much money, just give it to me, I'll use it to pay debt or take a vacation or whatever, it doesn't accumulate to replace the pension.
There are a lot, I know this anecdotally because I drive through the town, and there are a lot of young people who are living in homes and driving cars that when I was their age, I could not afford. And today, I can't afford either. But I'm looking at them thinking, man, they must have a great job. Do they? Or are they simply not saving because they're putting that money either into a car or, better yet, they're putting it in to a mortgage. They're putting it into a house. So all of their income is going into that house. And if they're doing that, isn't that wise? I mean, aren't they going to be able to harvest the equity on that home someday?
Well, let's look at what I call the rule of debt. It is okay for a person to take on debt to buy an asset, home mortgage. That's fine. You will build equity over time.
Okay.
The bad use of debt is to fund something where the next morning there's not an asset there. For example,
a vacation.
Eating out, taking vacations, things of that nature.
Yeah.
When it's over with, the debt's still there and there is no asset.
And
it is a huge difference.
And there are things called depreciating assets.
Yes.
Cars.
And it's still an asset. And, I think the point on cars is you shouldn't overreach. Right. You should do something reasonable.
So Kirby emails, I put 10% of each paycheck into my retirement account. I'm in my mid-30s. Is that where I should be putting the 10%, or should it be going back into a bank savings account? I want to hear from both of you on this. You're on the investment side, Larry. Start with you.
There's no question in my mind that's long-term money. He should be putting it into the 401k and into the investment choices in the 401k.
And you should be investing at a 401k at the highest level you can that they will match at least. And beyond.
At least the amount they will match. You're missing a great opportunity if you are missing matching funds.
Okay. And Parker, you're on the savings side of this equation. So if he wanted to put it in a savings vehicle, where would he put it?
Well, I think the investment approach there, if you can invest 10%, is really great, especially with that match. I think otherwise he should really be making sure that he has enough savings to cover at least 3 months of living expenses in the event of a job loss or another economic shock. So make sure that you're saving for the short and medium term as well as the long term. And I think unfortunately regular savings accounts or a normal savings account doesn't pay that well, but for that sort of short term use such as emergency savings, that would probably be okay.
Virginia on Facebook says it's not so much that millennials expect those things. This is referring back to a comment you made, Larry. Expect those things when they get out of college, big house, fancy car, etc. It's that they don't know better, and no one teaches basic life finance options to young people. They don't.
Should be taught in high school.
Okay.
But it's not.
But it's not. I mean, no one even told me how to balance a checkbook, not even my father, and he was good at it. They don't know or understand or have to clamor to get there, so they overborrow to get where they think they have to be. When we come back to the break, I want to follow up on that because I read yesterday a study by the Chicago School of Business and the UC Berkeley School of Business theorizes that conspicuous wealth is contagious. And we'll talk about that when we come back at Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and the North Carolina Turnpike Authority, offering NC Quick Pass transponders for automatically paid tolls when using the I-77 express lanes between Mooresville and Uptown. Details at ncquickpass.com. The partial government shutdown is nearing the 2-week mark, and a contentious meeting yesterday between the president and congressional Democrats made clear both sides are digging in. Meanwhile, an estimated 800,000 federal employees have either been furloughed or are working without pay. 1A. Here's from those affected by the shutdown coming up in 20 minutes at 10 o'clock right here on WFAE. And we will continue our conversation about saving money, how to do it, why you can't. What's your excuse? We'll find out some solutions here in a moment at Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
Would you believe there are untold billions of dollars in cash locked in a vault beneath Uptown?
These are like actual glass bins of money. Those are dollar bills.
Yes.
Those are real.
This week, we dive below the surface and see Charlotte's underground operation that you didn't even know existed. That's on FAQ City on iTunes, Google Play, and the NPR One app. Support for FAQ City comes from Bojangles Chicken and Biscuits.
It's Charlotte Talks on Listener Funded, 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. Parker Cohen is with us via Skype. He's Associate Director of Savings and Financial Capability at Prosperity Now. That's an organization that helps people understand how to save and provides savings instruments for them, if I understand it correctly. We'll talk about that in a moment. Larry Carroll is here. He's CEO and Chief Wealth Strategist for Carroll Financial. And I quoted Virginia on Facebook as saying, millennials, it's not that they don't understand that their parents had to work a long time for stuff, and so they borrow to get where they think they have to be. And that goes to a study by the Chicago School of Business and the UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, which theorizes that conspicuous wealth is contagious. So, as incomes at the top tiers have risen, and they have gone on to live the lives of the rich and famous that we've seen on television, the lower levels of the economy try to copy that high life for themselves, even though they can't afford it. Do you think that's true?
I think there may be some truth to that. I think that when you compare to other people, you don't know how much debt they've got to fund that conspicuous consumption.
You don't know how they did it.
You don't know how they did it. They could have inherited it, and you just don't know that part of it. There's a kind of a philosophical saying that I think is really good, and that is that comparison is the enemy of contentment. If you spend your time comparing to other people, they've got a bigger car, bigger yacht, whatever, bigger house, it's very difficult for you to be content with where you are.
And that is being fueled by social media every moment of every day. That's what Instagram is all about. You're photographing your food at a nice restaurant, and by gosh, they went there, so can we. Right?
Right.
This dovetails with another finding that poor people in America tend to spend more on visible goods, clothes, watches, jewelry, smartphones, cars, because these are the ways they telegraph to others that they aren't poor. If that's true, Parker, how do you convince people that hidden wealth, money socked away in a savings account or a 401k, therefore not available for visible goods, is a desirable thing? How do you convince them of that?
Well, I can't really speak to that phenomenon. I think our bigger concern at Prosperity Now is the inequalities that kind of lead to the sorts of things that you're talking about, and how we have a tax code that is very much skewed towards the affluent. And those benefits really aren't going to low to moderate income families.
Has the tax have the alterations in the tax structure under President Trump changed that a little bit? Has that helped lower income people, or was that also for the benefit of the wealthy, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, it absolutely has not helped lower income families. We have a new report out, or it came out earlier this year, that really highlights that and shows that in fact the new tax law really deepened the divides and the inequalities that are occurring, and particularly along racial lines. So communities of color, people of color, particularly Black Americans, are particularly disadvantaged by this new law.
So early on in the conversation, you alluded to government policy being part of the problem that we have low savings in this country, because we do have high medical expenses and we have low taxes, and therefore the whole thing is geared toward taking that low tax money and spending it or investing it in things if you're wealthy and you're getting tax breaks. If we fixed our healthcare system, but also raised taxes to do that while incentivizing savings in some way, would that work? Would people save more? Could they save more?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the key again is, making it easy to save, encouraging that savings and reducing the barriers that are keeping people from saving. So those barriers, we talked about medical debt is such a huge barrier for so many families. Once you get stuck in it, it's so hard to dig yourself out. Similarly with student loans, other types of debt. And then making sure that we are at the federal level, also state and local levels, are providing supports to make it easier, whether it is through increased interest rates or for savings, or providing support for the types of programs that really support savings through incentives or matches, and are really designed with our psychology and individual psychology around savings to help encourage that.
You work with high income individuals, Larry, all the time, and they are affected by government policy, et cetera. Can we have it both ways? And I would think that many of the people you work with are employers. Can we have it both ways? Can we have rising wages and tax policy that incentivizes savings, and still have companies be profitable?
Well,
And stocks to be valuable and to rise?
yeah, I think we can, Mike. What troubles me about the focus on the tax policy issue is we now have a situation where 50% of the people pay no taxes. It's difficult to cut taxes for people that don't pay any. Now, if there's a solution to it, it's probably an earned income credit, where if a person works and has earnings, that they get some type of credit for that. So you reward people who work rather than draw unemployment or welfare or whatever. But I mean, Parker's right in terms of it's kind of a vicious circle once you get into debt. But taxes are not a great way to try to solve those issues in my mind.
David emails, for many of us, we are in a situation that even if we are doing okay, it's hard to save money because there are close family members who are suffering. That way, the way that our social safety net has been shredded by the small government crowd, that's in quotes, has left many families in the predicament that if you are modestly successful, then the unmet needs of your extended family make it impossible to deny them in order to save for your own retirement.
Interesting point. Great point. In my career, I've probably helped 500 different people retire, analyze, do they have enough money to retire, set up a plan that provides them a monthly check in retirement to make sure that they don't outlive their money.
Right.
I've had 3 people have financial problems in retirement where I'll say they had to substantially change lifestyle because they were running out of money. None of those 3 have anything to do with investments. All 3 of them are a function of them taking their retirement money and using it to help their kids, their children.
Wow.
On the airplane, the stewardess says you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can help others. It applies in finance. If I'm the parent and I'm taking my retirement money and helping children, and I do too much of it, we all run out of money.
Yeah.
The senior generation and the junior generation run out of money. And I'm not saying you can't help your kids. I'm saying you got to find a balance. You can't be an enabler for your children.
You're not the bank.
You're not the bank. They need to solve their problems. You need to help provide a bridge for them to solve them, but they need to solve them.
Well, you're being a mean guy now.
I know.
Because we have a Twitter comment that says, massive, abusive medical bills plague the society. The minimum wage is not a living wage, and baby boomers decided to saddle their children with massive debt. They made sure the system benefited them. Is that a fair comment?
probably not.
Okay. Colin on Facebook, it says, I'll tell you why it's hard to save. Inflation and wage stagnation. A $100 purchase in 2000 is now a $147 purchase. We have to work more to make up that gap, and it's wearing people out. CNBC reports that although lack of money available to save is one reason Americans are so bad at saving, the other reason is they don't know how to save. About 35% say they don't know which product or account to use to start saving. Parker, any recommendations?
Yeah, there's a lot out there, but that's we don't, Prosperity Now, we're a national organization. We don't recommend individual products and programs, but a big problem is what you just cited, is that the marketplace is very confusing. Products and programs, especially for low to moderate income families, are not necessarily accessible or easy to find. We have a report that'll be coming out this spring analyzing the landscape of savings products and programs. So look for that, and that'll offer some ideas for organizations and individuals across the country on how to open or find savings products and programs that are right for them. I think the local financial institution, credit union, or banks are the most common entry point for individuals looking to save, but there are also lots of new fintech products, financial technology products that are web-based or app-based. I mentioned earlier Earned Saver Life that pairs with a traditional banking account. But lots of these are really emerging to offer people, especially the millennials that have come up a lot in this conversation, new ways to open accounts and save. But it's a complicated marketplace, and the education piece has come up earlier. It's not always clear where to go.
And it's not easy to do it because, it's one thing to say you should fund your 401k at least to the matching level and as much as you can if a 401k is offered. Many people don't work for people who offer 401ks. So then you have to do it on your own. You either have to buy stocks or bonds or mutual funds or on your own, or you put it into a savings account, and banks don't make it easy for low-income people to do that because of the fees attached to opening and maintaining an account. If you don't maintain it at a certain level, at some point, your savings is going to be eaten away by the fees, isn't it?
Well, it can be on a low transaction type account or a low dollar account. Parker mentioned the credit unions, and they do provide a very valuable service, including a lot of credit counseling things that we're talking about here. Going back to your conversation or your comment a minute ago about not knowing what account to put it in, we all hear things our own way. And what I heard you say was, I didn't know where to put it, so I just spent it.
Well, yeah.
So I think that can be a little bit of a cop-out that I didn't know what account to put it in.
Okay. Prosperity Now stresses income helps people get by. Savings helps people get ahead. And one thing your organization, Parker, does, and others around the country do as well, is help with a type of savings account I'd never heard of until yesterday, and you mentioned it earlier in the program, IDAs, or individual development accounts. What are they?
Yeah, so individual development accounts are a special kind of savings account where someone who is eligible, so typically someone who is low income, under 200% of the federal poverty level or around there, opens an account that is with a local or statewide organization. So Prosperity Now, we don't provide these, to be clear, but we work with organizations that do provide these, and that individual works with typically a nonprofit or government partner to set a financial goal to accumulate an asset. So they're looking to, this old adage is, income gets you by, assets get you ahead. So if you're able to save enough to buy a home or purchase an education, that can really be really critical in your financial life. And so the way it works is you save for a certain period of time, you set up some savings goals, you work with that organization to save. Oftentimes it's every month or when you can. And when you've reached your savings goal, that amount that you have saved is matched by that organization. So if you save $1,000, you might get $2,000 in match and be able to put that towards the down payment for a home. And so this is for folks that really can afford to live in a home, but they can't afford that initial step, that down payment that's so difficult to save for.
So people, even with the best of intentions, even those who put money aside, sometimes run into life, and life makes decisions for them. Lisa emails, so what do you do when you've saved 6 months of salary for rainy days, but your husband loses his job when he's in his 50s? You have 3 kids and 1 going to college. We had to use credit cards just to survive, and now we have large credit card debt, and it is sinking us. What do you do?
Survival is a strong instinct, and you have to do what you need to do for that. I think that based on what she outlined, she probably should be looking at one of the credit counseling companies to see how to deal with that credit card debt. It's unfortunate, but life happens.
And quickly, because we are out of time, Caleb emails, no offense to the easy bashing of millennials, but isn't there a broad swath of approaching retirees without enough saved assets? Yes, the answer is yes. And you say don't wait till you're 70. Don't work until you're 70 and then start saving, right?
Absolutely true. One thing I've learned in my company is don't generalize about millennials.
That's right.
There's a lot of different aspects to that.
Multiple apologies to millennials. Larry Carroll
That's
from
right.
Carroll Financial, Parker Cohen from Prosperity Now. Thank you both for the hour.